Aliens search for who left presents at the war memorial. It was the enemy human. Soldier, before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Valyrian Empire had fought countless wars across 3 galaxies, but none had scarred them quite like the Terran conflict on the memorial planet of Sanctus Prime. Beneath purple skies and twin moons stood the wall of the fallen, where 273,000 names were etched in crystalline stone. Each morning the caretakers would arrive to maintain the sacred site, and each morning they found something impossible. Commander Thalen of the Valyrian Guard stood before the wall for the 100th time in as many days, his 4 arms crossed in confusion. At the base of the monument, arranged with careful precision, were fresh flowers. Not Valyrian flowers, which grew in spirals and sang at dawn, but simple earth roses, red ones, a dozen of them. Their stems cut at perfect angles, water still glistening on their petals. The mystery had begun exactly 100 days ago. On the anniversary of the peace treaty, Phelan had arrived at dawn for his routine inspection, expecting to find the memorial empty and pristine as always. Instead, he discovered a single red rose placed carefully against the wall directly beneath the name of Captain Uras. At first he thought it was a mistake, perhaps a prank by some young Valyrian with a poor sense of humor, but the next morning there were 2 roses, the morning after that 3. Each day the count increased by 1 until now, 100 days later, a full dozen roses appeared each morning, arranged in perfect symmetry. Phelan had tried everything. He increased patrols. He installed more sophisticated sensors. He even stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights, watching the memorial from hidden positions. Nothing worked. The flowers appeared as if conjured by some invisible force, and whoever was leaving them possessed either technology far beyond Valerie and understanding, or skills that bordered on supernatural. "This is insane," said Thalen to his second in command, Lieutenant Sarah. "The peace treaty was signed 6 months ago. All humans left the sector. Our sensors show no unauthorized ships within 10 light years. Yet every single morning there are flowers." Sarah, whose silver skin reflected the morning light like polished metal, knelt beside the roses, her crystalline eyes, which could see into the ultraviolet spectrum, examined the flowers with intense concentration. She scanned them with her wrist device, and her face tightened with concern. "Commander, these were cut less than 4 hours ago. Cellular decay indicates they were grown in Earth standard soil composition, with trace elements that match the agricultural zones of Terra's North American continent. These came from a human garden. More than that, whoever is bringing them is using gardening techniques that suggest expert knowledge. These are not random flowers grabbed in haste. They were cultivated, cared for, and selected specifically for this purpose." Phelan's jaw clenched. He remembered the war too well. 3 years of brutal conflict that neither side had truly won. The Valorans had superior numbers and energy weapons. They had shields that could withstand direct nuclear detonations, and ships that could travel faster than anything in the human fleet. They had fought across a dozen star systems, winning battle after battle through sheer military might. But the humans had something else entirely. They had creativity that bordered on insanity. a refusal to accept defeat. That seemed hardwired into their DNA, and a capacity for both terrible violence and inexplicable compassion that left every Valoran strategist baffled. They fought with tactics no Valoran computer could predict. They turned defeats into victories through sheer audacity. They built weapons from scrap materials and won battles they should have lost by every logical calculation. Phelan had studied the Terran forces extensively. During the war, he read their military history, analyzed their tactical doctrines, tried to understand the psychological factors that made them such formidable opponents. What he discovered unnerved him. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. They had developed warfare into an art form that spanned every possible environment and scenario. They had strategies dating back thousands of years, constantly refined and adapted. When they turned those skills against an external enemy, they were devastating. But what truly frightened Valyrian commanders was not human aggression, it was their capacity for mercy. Human soldiers would fight with terrifying ferocity, then risk their own lives to save wounded enemies. They would destroy entire battalions without hesitation, then weep over individual casualties. They contained multitudes of contradiction that no Valyrian psychological profile could adequately explain. The war had ended, not with a decisive victory, but with exhaustion on both sides. Both militaries had been bled white, fleets were decimated, entire worlds were scarred by bombardment. The economic cost was staggering. And finally, when both the Valyrian High Council and the Terran Federation realized that continuation meant mutual destruction, they agreed to meet. The negotiations took for months. Neither side trusted the other. Every clause was debated endlessly, but eventually a peace treaty was signed. Borders were redrawn, and both species agreed to leave the contested systems as neutral ground. Sanctus Prime, where the bloodiest battle had occurred, became a memorial world. By mutual agreement, it would remain demilitarized. No weapons, no military installations, only the monuments to remember what had been lost. The Valorans built their memorial on the northern continent. The humans built theirs on the southern continent, across a valley that had once been a battlefield. Both sides agreed to tend their own dead and leave each other in peace, except someone was not following the agreement. Set up surveillance. Phelan ordered, I want every centimeter of this memorial covered. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, quantum signature detectors, whatever is doing this, we will find it. Over the following week, the Valyrian military installed enough security equipment to guard a weapons depot. They brought in the finest technology available, cameras with night vision capability that could spot an insect from half a kilometer away, sensitive enough to detect heat signatures through solid walls, pressure plates so finely calibrated they would alert if a falling leaf touched the ground, energy scanners that would detect any living creature larger than a mouse, tuned to identify the specific bioelectric signature of humans, seismic sensors buried beneath the memorial gardens that could detect footsteps from 100 meters away, atmospheric analyzers that would pick up human pheromones or exhalations. They installed quantum field detectors, devices capable of sensing temporal distortions or cloaking fields, they set up overlapping sensor grids with no blind spots. They even brought in military-grade equipment from the capital, technology normally reserved for guarding the emperor himself. Lieutenant Sarah personally supervised the installation. She was a specialist in security systems, having designed defensive grids for 3 military installations during the war. If anyone could catch this intruder, it was her. On the first night after installation, Phelan gathered his team in the monitoring station, a converted building half a kilometer from the memorial. 20 screens showed different angles of the wall of the fallen, readouts displayed data from hundreds of sensors, energy levels, atmospheric composition, ground vibrations, electromagnetic fields, everything that could possibly indicate the presence of an intruder. "This is absurd," muttered Corporal Vest, a young Valyrian who had joined the guard after the war. "We have enough equipment here to detect a ghost. Nothing could get past this." Sarah shot him a sharp look. "Humans are not bound by what should be possible, Corporal. They are deceptive, creative, and utterly unpredictable. Never underestimate them." Phelan nodded slowly. Sarah had fought in the war. She had watched humans turn certain defeats into impossible victories. She had seen them jury-rig weapons from broken equipment, navigate through supposedly impenetrable minefields, and survive situations that should have been fatal. Humans did not follow the normal rules of warfare or logic. They improvised. They adapted. They found ways. The flowers kept appearing. On the 8th day of comprehensive surveillance, Phelan sat in the monitoring station, staring at screens that showed absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Every sensor reading was nominal. No movement, no thermal signatures, no energy spikes, nothing. At exactly 300 hours, all the cameras flickered simultaneously. It lasted less than a second, just a brief disruption, barely noticeable. When they came back online, there were the flowers, 13 white leaves, this time arranged in a pattern that Phelan slowly recognized as the vow symbol for remembrance. Someone with knowledge of Valerie and culture had placed them deliberately. Sarah analyzed that disruption. Phelan commanded me what happened. She worked quickly, pulling up detailed logs from every system. "Commander, this is impossible. All our sensors show a localized electromagnetic pulse, but it was too weak to cause the disruption we saw. It was almost like something interfered with our equipment at the quantum level, disrupting observation without leaving a detectable trace. The energy signature does not match any known human technology." Phelan leaned forward, studying the data. "Show me the camera footage frame by frame." Sarah brought up the recording. They watched as the time stamp approached 300 hours. The image was crystal clear, showing the empty memorial. Then for exactly 23 frames, the image blurred slightly. It was subtle, easily missed in real time viewing, but in slow motion they could see something, a distortion in space, a shadow that moved faster than the recording equipment could properly track. Phelan had Sarah enhance the image, applying every filter and algorithm available. As the computer processed the data, a shape began to emerge from the blur. It was humanoid, tall, moving with practiced economy of motion. The figure approached the memorial wall, knelt, placed the flowers with careful deliberation, and then retreated. The entire sequence took less than 15 seconds. Freeze that frame, Tylan said, pointing at the screen. There, enhance that section. Computers zoomed in on the blurred figure, even heavily processed. The image was indistinct, like looking through water, but Thalen could make out certain details. The figure wore dark clothing, moved with military precision, carried something on their back, possibly a pack or equipment. Most tellingly, the body proportions were human, not Valyrian, with 4 arms and broad shoulders. Human, 2 arms. Bipedal, compact build. They send us a ghost, muttered Sarah, looking over his shoulder, or they have stealth technology we have never seen. Thalen stood abruptly, his mind racing. During the war, human stealth technology had been good but not perfect. Valyrian sensors could usually detect cloaked human ships or soldiers. This was something different, something that suggested either a massive technological leap forward or access to equipment that had been kept secret during the conflict. Neither possibility was comforting. Increase the guard rotation, Thalen ordered. Double all patrols. I want soldiers visible at all times. Maybe the presence of personnel will deter whoever this is. He paused, then added, and I will stay here tonight myself, if this is a human, if they are somehow bypassing every sensor we have. I will be here when they arrive. Sir, is that wise? Sarah asked. If this is a hostile action, if someone is trying to infiltrate the memorial for some purpose, you could be in danger. Thalen shook his head. No, this is not hostile. If they wanted to damage the memorial, they could have done so a H100 times. They are leaving flowers, Sarah. Honoring our dead. This is something else. That night, Thalen dismissed the other guards from the immediate vicinity of the memorial. He kept the automated systems running, but removed the visible military presence. He wanted whoever this was to feel safe enough to appear. Then he sat alone at the memorial on a stone bench positioned to give him a clear view of the wall of the fallen. The twin moons rose high, casting silver light across the crystalline names. Each one represented a Valyrian soldier who would never return home. Thalen knew many of them personally. Private Kellen, who had 3 children waiting for him when he deployed and never came back. Commander Vessa, who wrote poetry in the quiet moments between battles and dreamed of teaching literature when the war ended. Lieutenant Draxus, who had saved Thalen's life twice, first during the Battle of Kepler Station and again during the desperate retreat from the outer colonies. Thalen let his mind wander through memories he normally kept locked away. The war had taken so much from everyone. Young soldiers who should have been starting families, pursuing careers, exploring the galaxy in peace. Instead, they had fought and died in battles that ultimately achieved nothing but mutual suffering. The politicians had declared victory when the treaty was signed, but every veteran knew the truth. Nobody won. Both sides simply stopped losing. At 200 hours, Thalen heard nothing, saw nothing, felt nothing unusual. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the scent of native plants that grew wild around the memorial. Somewhere in the distance, a nocturnal creature made a haunting call. The twin moons continued their slow journey across the purple sky. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but every instinct he had developed over 20 years of military service suddenly screamed that he was not alone. It was not something he could identify consciously. No sound, no movement, no change in the environment, just an Absolute certainty that someone else was present, watching, waiting. Show yourself, he said quietly, not moving. From where he sat, I know you are here. I am not armed. I am not recording. This conversation will be between us alone. For a long moment there was only silence. The wind rustled through the gardens. The nocturnal creature called. Again, Phelan began to wonder if his instincts had failed him, if he was imagining things after too many sleepless nights. Then from behind a pillar he could have sworn was empty. A moment ago a figure emerged. The human was tall and lean, with the kind of physique that came from hard physical work rather than military training. He wore civilian clothes that were worn and faded, practically falling apart at the seams. His hair was dark with threads of silver, his face lined with age and something deeper, something that Phelan recognized because he saw it in his own reflection every morning. The look of someone who had seen too much death, who carried ghosts that never quite faded. The human's hands were rough, calloused from manual labor. He carried himself with careful control, moving slowly and deliberately to appear non-threatening. But Phelan could see the military training underneath, the way he maintained spatial awareness, the economical movements, the readiness to react if necessary. This was a soldier, regardless of what clothes he wore. In his hands was a simple bundle of flowers, yellow ones this time, wrapped in cloth that looked handmade. My name is Nathan Brooks, the human said, his voice quiet but steady, carrying the hint of an accent that Phelan recognized from intelligence reports as originating from Earth's North American region. I served in the Terran Defense Fleet during the war. I was at the Battle of Sanctus Prime. I held the rank of lieutenant. I was a fire control officer aboard the TDF Perseverance. Phelan slowly stood, keeping his own hands visible and empty. He made no sudden movements, no aggressive gestures. You are violating the peace treaty, he said. Humans are forbidden in this sector. The penalty for unauthorized presence on Sanctus Prime is immediate arrest and trial before the interstellar court. Nathan nodded, slowly meeting Phelan's eyes without flinching. I know. I have been violating it every day for 6 months. I have crossed into forbidden space 157 times. I have bypassed your security systems. I have broken at least 43 separate treaty provisions. I am fully aware of the consequences and I accept them. He paused, then added, but I could not stop coming. Why? Phelan demanded, genuine confusion in his voice. What purpose does this serve? The war is over. People won the right to return to your space. You could be home on Earth, living in peace, rebuilding your life. Instead, you risk everything to leave flowers at the grave of your enemies. Explain this to me, because I do not understand human thinking. Nathan moved toward the memorial wall and Phelan tensed slightly, but the human simply knelt and placed the flowers at the base, beside a name about 2-3 of the way down. The left side, Captain Urina's. The name was etched in crystalline letters that gleamed in the moonlight. Nathan placed his hand gently on the stone beneath the name, and Phelan saw that his hand was shaking. I am sorry, Nathan said to the name, his voice breaking. I am so sorry. You did not deserve to die. None of them did. None of them. Phelan felt something cold settle in his chest. He moved closer, looking at the name the human had chosen. Uran Thaz had been a celebrated officer, a tactical genius, and Phelan's mentor. He had served for 30 years, rising through the ranks. Through skill and dedication, he believed in honorable warfare, in minimizing civilian casualties, in treating prisoners with dignity. He was respected by everyone who served with him. He had been 58 years old when he died. He had a wife who still wore black, children who visited his name on this wall every month without fail, grandchildren who would never know him. He died in the final assault on the Terran defensive line, Phelan said, quietly, killed by human artillery fire. The barrage came from Grid Sector 7. Alpha. It was devastating. We lost over 2,000 soldiers in 7 minutes. Nathan looked up at him, and Phelan was struck by the raw pain in the human's eyes, the kind of pain that could not be faked or manufactured, the kind that came from carrying unbearable weight for far too long. Yes, said Nathan, 7 minutes. I know exactly how long it lasted because I watched the chronometer the entire time. I input the targeting coordinates. I verified the fire solutions. I gave the authorization code. Then I watched our artillery systems execute the bombardment. 417 kinetic rounds, 92 plasma mortars, 38 cluster missile packages. I can recite every weapon type, every timing sequence, every target adjustment. I remember it all. You came here to mock us, Phelan said, his voice hard despite the confusion he felt swirling in his chest, to gloat over your kills, to remind us of our defeat. Nathan's face contorted with something between anger and anguish. No, Commander, no, I came to apologize. I came because I killed him, me. Personally, my finger on the authorization button, my voice giving the command to fire, and he did not deserve to die. None of them deserved to die the way they did. He stood slowly, facing Phelan directly. Do you want to know what it sounded like when we got confirmation of the hits? The communications officer announced 2,300 casualties, and there was cheering. Cheering, Commander, young soldiers celebrating that we had killed over 2,000 enemy combatants. They were handing out drinks in the mess hall that night. Congratulations, Lieutenant Brooks, outstanding targeting. You saved countless human lives today. That is what they told me, and you believed it was wrong, Phelan said, trying to understand. You thought killing enemy soldiers in a war was something to be ashamed of. Nathan shook his head slowly. No, not then. Then I thought I had done my duty. I went to sleep that night believing I was a good soldier who had executed his orders properly. It was not until 2 days later that I learned the truth. Your people were broadcasting on all frequencies, begging for a ceasefire in Grid Sector 7 Alpha, explaining that there were civilians in the area, evacuating refugees from a settlement, providing exact locations, and requesting safe passage for non-combatants under the Articles of Warfare. Our communications were jammed. Nathan continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Some kind of solar interference, they said later, or maybe deliberate jamming by someone. We never found out, but we never received those broadcasts. We saw your military column advancing. We saw what our sensors interpreted as combat units. We made tactical decisions based on incomplete information, and by the time we understood what we had done, it was too late. By the time someone unjammed the communications and we heard your pleas, there was nothing left in Grid Sector 7, Alpha, but wreckage and bodies. Phelan felt his breath catch. He remembered the aftermath, the rescue. Teams digging through rubble, the tiny corpses they found in what had been a schoolhouse, the parents who arrived at the evacuation site only to discover their children were gone, the screams, the grief, the rage, the absolute incomprehension that war could take not just soldiers but innocent lives with such casual efficiency. I killed 378 civilians that day, Commander Nathan said, and his voice broke completely. I killed them because I was too slow to question my orders, too focused on following procedure to think about what I was doing. And one of the best officers in your military died trying to save them. Captain Thaz was leading the evacuation personally. He was not even armed. He was driving a transport vehicle full of children when my ordnance hit him. Phelan closed his eyes, remembering the reports. Urin had volunteered for the evacuation mission. He had not needed to go. He was a senior officer. He could have sent subordinates, but that was not who Urin was. He led from the front. He protected those who could not protect themselves. And he died because a human weapons officer made a decision based on faulty information. For a long moment neither spoke. The wind moved through the memorial garden, rustling leaves that grew in spirals and hummed softly in the breeze. The twin moons cast shadows that danced across the crystalline stone. The weight of history pressed down on both of them. Why flowers? Phelan finally asked, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to suppress. Why not a message? Why not go through official channels, offer formal apologies? The Federation has diplomatic protocols for war crimes and civilian casualties. You could have submitted reports, requested tribunals, faced judgment properly. Nathan laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor, because what would I say? I am sorry I killed your friends is not something you put in a diplomatic communication. Sorry I murdered children. Sorry I destroyed families. Sorry I ended futures that should have been bright and full of promise. Those words mean nothing on official documents. They are processed, filed, archived, and forgotten, because official apologies are words on paper, signed by politicians who were never there, who never smelled the smoke or heard the screams or felt the weight of what they cost. He turned back to the wall, placing his hand on Captain Du's name again, because in my culture, when you have wronged someone, you tend their grave. You make sure they are remembered. You do it yourself with your own hands for as long as it takes. You do not send a representative. You do not delegate your guilt. You carry it. You own it. You make it part of who you are. So you never forget and never do it again. How long will it take? Phelan asked quietly. Nathan looked at him steadily. I do not know. Maybe never. Maybe I will be leaving flowers here when I am an old man, barely able to walk, using my last strength to place one more rose for people I killed 40 years earlier. But I will keep coming until I am dead or someone stops me. These people deserved better than to die because I pushed a button. The least I can do is make sure someone remembers them. The least I can do is carry their names in my heart so they are not just numbers in a casualty report. Phelan felt something shift in his understanding. The Valyrian propaganda during the war had portrayed humans as brutal warriors without honor, savage creatures who would do anything to win, who valued victory over decency, who treated war as a game to be won, rather than a tragedy to be ended. His commanders had taught him that humans were dangerous precisely because they lacked the moral framework that governed valor in society. They would lie, cheat, steal, and kill without the constraints of honor or ethics. But this man before him contradicted everything those lessons had taught. Nathan had traveled across hostile space, risked imprisonment or death, abandoned whatever life he had built after the war, all to leave flowers for enemies he had killed. This was not the behavior of someone without honor. This was something else entirely, something the Valerian understanding of humans had completely missed. You cannot keep doing this, Phelan said, but his tone had changed. It was no longer a command or a threat. It was almost a plea, a concern for this broken human who was destroying himself with guilt. The treaty forbids it. If my superiors find out, they will demand your arrest. There will be an interstellar incident. The peace is fragile. Both governments are looking for reasons to resume hostilities. Hardliners on both sides want the war to continue. If they learn that a human is illegally entering Valorant space, violating our memorial, it could be the excuse they need. Then do not tell them, Nathan said simply, or arrest me. Now I will not fight you. I will go quietly, but I am not leaving these people forgotten, not if I can help it. Even if I spend the rest of my life in a Valerian prison, even if they execute me for treaty violations, at least I will have tried. At least I will know I did everything I could to honor the people I killed. Phelan stood and paced. His military training said this was a clear violation. His duty was obvious, but something else, something human soldiers had infected him with during the war, whispered different advice. Sometimes rules and honor were not the same thing. Tell me about the others, Phelan said suddenly. You said you were at the Battle of Sanctus Prime. You must have been involved in more than one engagement. Nathan nodded slowly. I was a soldier for 8 years. Most of that was the war with your people. He stood and walked to another section of the wall, placing his hand near another name. Lieutenant Veracruz. I shot her ship down during the 4th Battle of the Kuiper Belt. She ejected, but her pod life support failed before rescue arrived. He moved to another name, Commander Solace Dren. His battalion was caught in a minefield. My unit laid 78 soldiers died. He continued walking, touching name after name. Private Jen Kavar, Sergeant Thilmore, Captain Yes Brennan. I remember all of them, Commander, every single one. Phelan followed him, listening as Nathan recited the circumstances of each death, battles he remembered, decisions made in fractions of seconds that resulted in lost lives. The human's memory was perfect, not because of any enhancement technology, but because he had forced himself to remember, had made himself carry every death as a personal burden. You will destroy yourself, Phelan said quietly. Grief like this will consume you. Nathan turned to face him. Good, let it. I have earned it. No, Phelan said firmly. No, you have not. He gestured to the wall. I fought in every one of these battles you mentioned. I gave orders that killed human soldiers. I made tactical decisions that sent people to their deaths. War is a machine that feeds on soldiers from both sides. You are not uniquely guilty, but I killed civilians, Nathan said, his voice rising slightly. Children, Commander There was a school in that settlement. 6 children between the ages of 5 and 12 years old. I killed them because I was too slow to question my orders, too focused on following procedure to think about what I was doing, and I Phelan said, his voice hard, destroyed a human medical frigate because my sensors said it was a troop ship. It was clearly marked with medical symbols, but I convinced myself it was a trick. There were 200 patients on board, wounded soldiers who could have been saved, doctors, nurses, all dead because I could not trust what I was seeing. Nathan stared at him. The mercy of Athens, that was you, that was me. Tylan confirmed. So you see, we are both killers, both haunted, both trying to make amends in our own ways. The question is not whether we deserve forgiveness. The question is what we do. Now what can we do? Nathan asked. War is over. The dead are dead. We cannot bring them back. Phelan looked at the memorial wall at the thousands of names that represented lives ended too soon. Then he looked at Nathan, at this enemy soldier who had become something else, something he did not have a word for. In Valerie, you are right, Phelan said. You cannot bring them back, but you can make sure they are not forgotten. And you should not do it alone. Nathan blinked. What are you saying? I am saying, Phelan replied, that starting tomorrow you will enter through the front gate. You will register with memorial services as an official visitor. You will have authorization to be here, and you will not be the only one leaving flowers. The human looked stunned. You would allow that? Your people would accept a human coming to their memorial? Some would not. Phelan admitted. Many would not, but I am the commander of this facility, and I have discretion over who visits. Besides, he allowed himself a small smile. I suspect once people understand why you are here, you may be surprised by the response. Over the following weeks, Nathan came through the proper channels. He registered. He was issued a visitor badge, and true to Phelan's word, he was not alone. The first day, Phelan himself accompanied Nathan to the wall. Together they placed flowers. Valyrian commander told stories about the soldiers whose names were etched in stone. Nathan listened and shared what he knew about the battles where they had died. The second week, Lieutenant Sarah joined them. She had lost her brother in the war. Nathan had not been involved in that particular battle, but he knelt with her at her brother's name and listened as she spoke about who he had been before he became a soldier. He had wanted to be a teacher. He had loved music. He had been kind. By the third week, other Valorans began to appear. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because they had heard about the human who traveled across space to apologize. A few came because they, like Phelan, had their own memories of humans they had killed and could not forget. Not everyone was welcoming. There were protests, angry families who did not want a human anywhere near the memorial. Phelan spent long hours explaining, justifying, defending his decision, but slowly, gradually, something shifted. One morning, a Valyrian mother approached Nathan as he was placing flowers. Her son had died in the bombardment that Nathan had ordered. She knew this because Phelan had provided full transparency about why Nathan was there. Nathan prepared himself for her anger, her grief, her entirely justified rage. Instead, she handed him a bundle of flowers. Help me place these, she said quietly. Tell me about that day. Tell me what happened to my son. Nathan he told her everything he knew. The Tactical situation, the desperation of that moment, the horror when they realized what they had hit. He did not make excuses, did not try to minimize his responsibility. He simply told the truth. When he finished, the mother was crying, but she took his hand, this enemy soldier who had killed her child, and she said, "Thank you for remembering him. Thank you for carrying that weight. He would not have wanted you to destroy yourself over this. My son believed in honor. He would have understood that you were a soldier following orders in an impossible situation." Nathan wept with her, and Phelan, watching from a distance, understood something profound. Humans had a saying: to err is human, to forgive divine. But perhaps forgiveness was not divine at all. Perhaps it was the most fundamentally sentient thing any species could do. The choice to see the person behind the action, the courage to let go of hatred even when it was deserved. 6 months after Nathan had first revealed himself, the memorial held a special ceremony. Representatives from both the Valoran Empire and the Terran Federation attended. It was the first joint event since the peace treaty. There was tension, awkwardness, the weight of too much history and too much pain. Phelan stood at a podium before the assembled crowd and spoke. He told them about Nathan, about the flowers, about the countless mornings when an enemy soldier had risked everything to honor Valerie, and dead, about what that gesture had meant to him and to others who had also visited the human memorial across the valley. Then Nathan spoke. He did not talk about politics or diplomacy. He talked about the names on the wall, about who they had been, what they had meant to the people who loved them. He talked about the cost of war and the responsibility that soldiers carried forever. When he finished, there was silence. Then slowly a Valoran in the crowd began to clap. Others joined, not everyone. Some left in disgust, but enough remained, enough to matter. At the end of the ceremony, both memorials, Valoran and human, were officially redecided as shared memorial sites. Both species would maintain them. Both would honor the fallen from both sides, and visitors would be welcome regardless of which world they came from. It did not heal everything. Grief and anger and loss were not erased by a single gesture or a series of ceremonies, but it was a beginning, a recognition that the soldiers who had fought were more than their uniforms, more than their orders. They were people who had made terrible choices in terrible circumstances, and they deserved to be remembered fully in all their complexity. Nathan never left Sanctus Prime. He became the official human liaison to the memorial services. He spent his days helping families from both species find the names of their lost loved ones. He organized remembrance events. He trained other veterans who wanted to volunteer at the memorial. He found purpose in the thing that had once destroyed him. Phelan remained commander of the Valyrian Guard. On Sanctus Prime, he and Nathan became friends, though neither would have predicted such a thing was possible. Years earlier, when they had been trying to kill each other across vast distances of space, they spent evenings talking about the war, about what it had meant, about how to prevent the next one. One night, sitting beneath the twin moons, Nathan asked Phelan something that had been troubling him. Do you think we have made a difference? Do you think any of this matters? Phelan considered the question carefully. 6 months ago I would have said no. I would have said that the dead are dead and flowers change nothing, but I have watched Families find peace here, I have seen. Veterans from both sides talk to each other instead of fighting, I have seen. Young Valorans and young humans working together to maintain these memorials, so. Yes, I think it matters, not because it changes the past, but because it changes us. Nathan smiled slightly. You have become very wise, Commander, I learned. From a human, Phelan replied, a very stubborn, very foolish human who thought it was important to leave flowers for his enemies. Years passed, the memorials on Sanctus Prime became a place of pilgrimage for both species. Schools brought students to learn about the war and its costs. Veterans came to remember, families came to grief, and slowly the planet stopped being a symbol of conflict and became instead a symbol of what came after, of the hard work of peace. Nathan grew older, his hair turned fully gray, then white, his steps became slower, but every morning he still walked to the wall, still placed flowers, still spoke to the names etched in stone. One morning Phelan found him sitting on the bench near Captain Nass's name. Nathan looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. I think, Nathan said quietly, that I am ready to go home. Phelan sat beside him to earth. No, Nathan said, here, this is home now, but I think I am ready to stop carrying all of this, to let it rest, to forgive myself maybe. Phelan put a hand on the human's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that had taken years to become natural between their species. Then you have earned that peace, have I? Nathan asked. Yes, Phelan said firmly. You have spent 15 years honoring the dead. You have helped more people than you will ever know. You have turned your grief into something meaningful. If Captain Nuz could speak, I think he would tell you that you have more than made amends. Nathan looked at the name on the wall for a long time. Then he stood, placed one final bundle of flowers at the base of the memorial, and said, thank you, Captain, for teaching me what it means to carry responsibility. I hope you rest well. They walked together back to the memorial center. Nathan moved to the human section where names of Terran soldiers were carved into black stone. He found the name he was looking for. Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, the pilot who had saved Tylen's life. He placed flowers there too. She was brave. Nathan said, I read her file. She volunteered for the most dangerous missions, always tried to minimize casualties, even enemy casualties. The humans could have used more soldiers like her. We all could have. Phelan agreed. Over the following years, Nathan's health declined, age caught up with the years of stress and guilt he had carried, but he never stopped his work at the memorial. Even when he needed assistance to walk, he insisted on making his daily rounds. Younger volunteers, both human and Valoran, learned from him. They heard his stories. They understood the weight of what had happened here and why it mattered to remember. When Nathan Brooks finally passed away at the age of 73, his funeral was held at the memorial. Thousands attended. Valorans and humans stood side by side. Military officers from both fleets, families who had lost loved ones in the war, young people who had only known peace but understood what it had cost. Phelan delivered the eulogy. He spoke about meeting Nathan that first night, about his confusion and anger about watching this human soldier transform grief into purpose, about learning what true courage looked like. Nathan Brooks was my enemy, Phelan said to the assembled crowd. He killed people I cared about. He made decisions that cost Valerian lives, and he spent the rest of his life making sure those people were not forgotten. He taught me that war does not end when the shooting stops. It ends when we choose to see each other as more than enemies, when we choose to honor the fallen on both sides, when we choose the harder path of understanding instead of the easier path of hatred. Nathan was buried at the memorial in a section reserved for those who had dedicated their lives to peace. His grave marker was simple, bearing only his name, his years of service, and a single line he had requested. He tried to remember. Beside his grave, flowers appeared every morning. Sometimes they were left by Valorans who had learned from him, sometimes by humans who traveled from Earth to honor him, sometimes by young people who had never known the war but understood what he represented. Phelan continued his work at the memorial for another decade. When he finally retired, he chose to stay on Sanctus Prime. He spent his remaining years walking the grounds, talking to visitors, making sure the stories were told correctly. He died peacefully at 86, and he was buried beside Nathan, his former enemy who had become his closest friend. The memorial stands today, a place where two species learn to move beyond their worst moments, where names carved in stone remind the living of the cost of conflict, where flowers appear every morning, placed by volunteers who understand that remembrance is not about glorifying war, but about honoring the people who lived through it. The Valerian Empire and the Terran Federation never fought another war. They did not become close allies, but they maintained respectful distance. They traded, they communicated. When disputes arose, they negotiated instead of mobilizing fleets, and whenever tensions escalated, diplomats from both sides would make a pilgrimage to Sanctus Prime, to the memorial where a human soldier had once left flowers in secret. And they would remember what war actually cost. In the memorial center, there is now a museum. It contains artifacts from the war, weapons, uniforms, personal effects recovered from battlefields, but the centerpiece of the museum is a simple display. It shows the first flowers Nathan left, preserved in stasis. Beside them is a hollow recording of his confession to Phelan, explaining why he had come. Millions of people have watched that recording. Students study it in schools. Soldiers watch it during training. Parents show it to children to explain why peace matters, and every person who sees it understands something fundamental about what it means to be a thinking, feeling being, whether human or Valoran or any of the other species that have since joined the galactic community. Mistakes can be acknowledged. Harm can be addressed. Enemies can become something else if both sides choose courage over comfort. And sometimes the most powerful act of defiance against the machinery of war is to remember the individuals it consumed, to honor them regardless of which side they fought for, and to make sure their deaths meant something. The flowers still appear every morning at the memorial. New volunteers have taken up the tradition Nathan started. They place roses and leaves and orchids at the base of the walls. They speak the names aloud, so the dead are not forgotten. They tell the story of the human soldier who could not let go until he had made amends. And in the quiet moments before dawn, when twin moons cast silver light across crystalline stone and the flowers wait to be placed, if you listen carefully, you might hear something. Not voices, Exactly, not ghosts, but perhaps the sound of old wounds beginning to heal. The sound of two species learning that the opposite of war is not peace, but rather the courageous choice to honor life even after death, to build understanding even after conflict, to plant flowers even in the soil of sorrow. Nathan Brooks left more than flowers at that memorial. He left a lesson that has endured across generations, that humanity's greatest strength is not its weapons or its tactics or its refusal to surrender. It is the capacity to look at the worst thing you have ever done, to carry that weight with full honesty, and then to spend every remaining day trying to make the universe slightly better than you left it, to honor the dead, to serve the living, to remember that everyone, even enemies, are people who mattered to someone. The memorial will stand for centuries, the names will be read for generations, and the flowers placed each morning by hands both human and Valerian will continue to bloom. Symbol of what happens when soldiers choose remembrance over forgetting, when enemies choose understanding over hatred, and when one person decides that making amends matters more than protecting yourself from pain. In the end, Nathan Brooks was right. It did take the rest of his life, but he made sure the fallen were remembered. He made sure their deaths were honored. He made sure that the next generation understood the true cost of war, and in doing so, he proved something that military strategists and politicians had never quite grasped: that humans are dangerous, not just because they fight hard. They are dangerous because they remember, because they carry their dead with them, because they will cross hostile space and risk everything just to place flowers on an enemy's grave. Because when a human decides something matters, when they decide that honor requires action, there is no force in the galaxy that can make them stop. The Valerian Empire had fought humans expecting soldiers. What they got instead was something far more formidable, a species that waged peace with the same intensity they waged war, that brought the same stubborn determination to building bridges that they brought to burning them, that could look at an enemy and see a person, that could turn grief into purpose and guilt into growth. And that ultimately was why the humans won, not the war, but something more important. They won the peace, they won the future. They won the chance to show the galaxy that strength is not just about how hard you can hit, but about how much you are willing to carry, how far you are willing to go, and how deeply you are willing to care. The flowers bloom every morning at the memorial: red roses, white lilies, yellow daisies, blue orchids, every color, every species, every type. They are placed with care by volunteers who learned from Nathan Brooks that some duties do not end when the fighting stops. Some responsibilities last a lifetime, and some acts of courage happen not on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when you choose to remember instead of forget, to honor instead of hate, to build instead of destroy. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, and I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next